This is a News for You live stream update on the Albanese Labor Government Mis- and Disinformation Bill, brought to you by Freedom Media WA. In a surprising turn of events, the Albanese Labor Government has announced it will delay the implementation of its highly anticipated Combating Mis- and Disinformation Bill until at least the middle of next year, 2024. Now, if that only was true, because it's not, what is true is this Combating Mis- and Disinformation Bill will be delayed until at least the middle of next year, 2024. What's not true, and is more and more in line with what Australians are seeing more and more from this Albanese Labor-led government, is the government isn't telling you about this later development, which means in turn, legacy mainstream media aren't reporting on it either. You either get a lack of detail or no information whatsoever. On Sunday, David Coleman MP, the Shadow Minister for Communications, tweeted this media statement. Now, I won't read all of the statement as it's lengthy, but I've pulled out the juicy bits. Here we go. This is the tweet from David Coleman MP. The Albanese government has today made a humiliating backdown on its planned misinformation bill, with admissions it got it wrong, and it has been forced to make fundamental changes to its plan. Shadow Communications Minister David Coleman said today's breakdown confirmed why so many people and organisations have rallied against Labor's plan. Quote, "The government has today begun walking back from one of its signature policies," MP David Coleman said. "We are seeing the pack of cards of the misinformation bill starting to come down." There has been a deep catalogue of criticisms of the bill from groups including the Human Rights Commission, Civil Liberties Group, and leading lawyers and religious bodies and the media union. There's been an extraordinary 23,000 submissions and comments from the government's draft bill, with the vast majority of the fraction published so far being hostile towards Labor's plan. If you want to read the full statement, you could go to David Coleman's webpage or Twitter account, and I'll also post a copy of this statement in the comments after this stream. So what does this mean? Well, whilst this battle to save free speech isn't over, it's a significant round win for the people and democracy in the 12-round bout to end your social media free speech. And I say this as some will know, 2 weeks ago in another News for You live stream, I brought you part of the Senate estimates hearing where the head of the Australian Communications and Media Authority said the Albanese Labor government is full steam and dead set on tabling this bill by the end of Parliament this year. Here's a quick refresher.
The Minister said that we would have the bill by the end of the year. Do you think that that's likely?
Senator, I think the department this morning indicated that that was the current timetable. I don't have any further information I can add to the...
So you're confident that it'll be in the Senate and the House within the next couple of weeks?
That's the timetable that we've been advised of. I don't have any further information.
They haven't advised you differently?
They haven't advised us differently, no.
This delay in tabling Elbow's daily catch cry.
It's misinformation.
Misinformation.
The misinformation.
The misinformation.
Misinformation.
Misinformation and disinformation.
His government's bill to combat mis- and disinformation and this delay is not simply a procedural one. It's due to the overwhelming flood of public submissions from citizens, advocacy groups, the Human Rights Commission, and a number of legal and media unions, as I've said. His government's bill to combat mis- and disinformation and this delay is not simply a procedural one. It's due to the overwhelming flood of public submissions from citizens, advocacy groups, the Human Rights Commission, and a number of the legal and media professions. It's also triggered a scrambling by the government's bureaucrats, not to mention the Minister for Communications, Rowland, who had just one important job given to her by Elbow, and that's to make sure that she ends your free speech. There's another story that Elbow and Minister Rowland and legacy mainstream media isn't telling you about, and it's this. Poor Michelle Rowland has had a week to forget. You may remember I highlighted in a previous stream a few weeks ago, she came under scrutiny late last year for accepting $8,960 for a dinner to support her election campaign, and another donation of $10,000 just days before the last election from the gambling giant Sportsbet. A report released just late last week has uncovered Minister Michelle Rowland has yet again been wined and dined on her birthday no less, at one of Melbourne's top restaurants by the gambling lobbyist Responsible Wagering Australia, who represents Sportsbet, Bet365 and Ladbrokes. And here's the kicker. Minister Michelle Rowland hasn't broken any parliamentary rules, which is why in Parliament yesterday, our Teal MP, now who would have thought that, tabled a private amendment bill called the Lobbying, Improving Government Honesty and Trust Bill 2023, that if it passes, it would have stopped the lunch that Michelle Rowland's had from happening. And this meeting would have been publicly known in almost real time rather than some 12 months down the track, as is the case here, as her ministerial diary will be open for public scrutiny. Makes perfect sense to me, and I for one would make a public submission supporting this bill if it came to public submissions, but it won't. Right now, Michelle Rowland is grappling with a different challenge, convincing you that whining and dining with gambling bigwigs is somehow less harmful to your tinfoil hat posts on Facebook. Good luck with that.
Can you give an example of misinformation?
Probably the best example that the platforms now admit they probably got wrong was after the outbreak of the pandemic, there were some people who said this might be an accidental lab leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And Facebook and others labelled that misinformation and they banned it or restricted it on their platforms.
Right.
Something that was regarded as misinformation only a couple of years ago is now a mainstream, respected alternative theory for the source of the pandemic. It never should have been censored. And if the platforms are doing that already without the threat of fines and enforcement from ACMA, imagine what they're going to do in the future.
I certainly don't see Elbow getting his 16-month late, newly formed National Anti-Corruption Commission casting the pub test ruler over Michelle Rowland's lavish luncheon. I'm Lindsay from Freedom Media WA. Sharing is more than caring, as legacy mainstream media won't bring you this type of detail. Brought to you by Freedom Media WA, where journalism should never be a government narrative.